Welcome, welcome. Welcome to the third and final part of the 2024 East Bay Leadership Series, presented by Kaiser Permanente. Can we get a round of applause for everybody here tonight? This morning? It's not tonight. My name is Mark Orcutt, and I have the good fortune of serving as the president and CEO of the East Bay Leadership Council. We are a nonprofit organization led by employers and on a mission to strengthen the economy and improve quality of life in the East Bay. That's a tall order, with plenty of tasks on the to-do list, but one that we have made our mark through decades of strategic advocacy, thoughtful research, informative and inspiring events like what we'll have this morning, and a candidate training program called Build the Bench, helping people learn how to run and win elected office. It's all made possible because of our employer members. As is often the case at East Bay Leadership Council events, you are in very good company this morning, not tonight, this morning. As I look around the room, I see manufacturers. I see bankers and builders and energy companies. I see public utilities and law firms and nonprofits from doing everything from career training to solar power. I see water districts and conservationists and labor leaders. I see engineers and artists and real estate leaders. What else we got? We got elected officials, small business owners, and we're even fortunate enough to be joined by a dozen or so DVC students who are participating in the Year Up program at DVC. Give them a round of applause. While they're all on very different career tracks, maybe a few of them will be inspired to go into public policy and public service as a portion of this program today. And I wish them luck. I hear it's finals week, so hold on tight. All right. Well, I would also, most of all, I see a lot of people in this room that care deeply about the East Bay's future, as do we. It's a joy to help lead and learn from such a dynamic organization. I'm grateful for your attendance and continued support. If you'd like to learn more about the East Bay Leadership Council, I am one of the easiest people to find. You call our main line. I pick up about half the time. And you can just talk to me after the program. Find anybody with the maroon board member name flag, and I'm sure they'll tell you all the great things about the East Bay Leadership Council. We have a few, and when I say a few, I mean a lot, of elected officials in attendance this morning that I would like to recognize. And while I know it's a challenge, please try to hold your applause until I applause, okay? When I start to clap, that's your cue that you can also clap, okay? We're gonna try this on for size. Alameda County Supervisor Lena Tam, Contra Costa County District Attorney Dinah Beckton, Contra Costa County Clerk Recorder Registrar Kristen Connolly, Contra Costa County Office of Education Superintendent Lynn Mackey, City of Alameda Mayor Marilyn Ezzie Ashcraft, City of Piedmont Mayor Jen Kavanaugh, City of Concord Mayor Eddie Bursan, City of Pinole Mayor Maureen Toms, City of Walnut Creek Mayor Loella Haskew, Mayor Pro Tem Cindy Darling, Council Member Cindy Silva, and Council Member Matt Francois. Great turnout from Walnut Creek, I will say. City of Pleasant Hill, Vice Mayor Sue Nowak. City of Martinez, Council Member Satinder Malhi. City of Pittsburgh, while she was going to join us this morning, had to miss for a family emergency, but she is in our thoughts, Council Member Chanel Scales Preston. City of El Cerrito, Council Member Gabe Quinto. City of Hercules, Council Member Chris Kelly and Council Member Alexander Walker Griffin. City of Clayton, Council Member Kim Trupiano. From the Contra Costa Community College District, Director Rebecca Barrett and Director Andy Lee. From the Contra Costa Office of Education, Sarah Butler. From the East Bay Regional Park District, Director John Mercurio. And from the Contra Costa Water District, Director Ernie Avila. Please put your hands together for a great list of elected officials. We also have staff in attendance. Now I'm starting to see the points. I'm sure I missed somebody. What elected official did I miss? Did you get Kristen? I said Kristen right off the top. Yeah, she was second on the list. Welcome, Kristen, my predecessor as president and CEO. Good to see you. Good job on the election. Staff in attendance this evening from our elected officials include District Director to Mark DeSaulnier, or she's not here this evening, still in my script, but grateful for her engagement with the organization, Chanel Scales-Preston, District Director to Assemblymember Tim Grayson, Michael Sponsler, and District Director to Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, Michelle Henry. Thank you to our staff for supporting us and being such great partners with the East Bay Leadership Council. All right, we'll give them an applause too. Let's clap again. Okay. I would also like to highlight EBLC's next signature event on the calendar. We will welcome Gary Schlossberg, a global strategist and economist for the Wells Fargo Economic Institute. Gary will share insights into the state of the U.S. economy and provide an outlook through 2025. There's a QR code on the screen. I don't know if you'll be able to scan it, but you can give it a shot. And you can register right now. I will let you pull out your phones to do that if you would like to join us. That is free for employees of EBLC members. So please, I hope you will join us. That is going to be a webinar hosted on May 1st. Okay, with that, it is now my pleasure to hand it off to Horace Green, who is not only a partner at Brother Smith, but also legal counsel for the East Bay Leadership Council's Executive Committee. Horace has been a behind-the-scenes strategic leader of our executive committee for several years, and we are reluctantly preparing for a post-Horace era as he rolls off the executive committee this summer. Much emphasis on reluctant there. I am grateful for his steadfast support and for helping us kick off today's event. Horace, take the stage.
Before I left the house this morning, my wife said, keep it short and no jokes. So this, you're not gonna hear. Sorry about that. Thank you for that introduction, Mark. I'm proud to serve as a partner in the law firm of Brothers Smith, LLP. Our firm assists individuals and businesses with corporate and real estate transactions, wealth, estate and tax planning, and employment-related matters. In addition, the firm handles all phases of litigation, including settlement negotiations, mediations, arbitrations, trials, and yes, appeals. As Mark mentioned, it's also been my pleasure and my privilege to serve as East Bay Leadership Council legal counsel since 2017. This event series has been a long-standing tradition for the East Bay Leadership Council, with a long list of noteworthy and influential dignitaries sharing their insights with us. This morning is no exception, with the brilliant and accomplished Honorable Cantil-Sakauye joining us for a conversation focused on California law and policy. We are certainly ending the 2024 series on a high note. Now for a few thank yous. One of the council's strengths has always been our diverse membership of employers, and that diversity is certainly evident among our series sponsors. So I'd like to highlight our sponsors, and again, as Mark said, please hold off until the end when you can join me in applause. First, I'd like to acknowledge our presenting sponsor, Kaiser Permanente, with leadership from the council's Vice Chair of Events, Deneen Wolford. Kaiser has recognized the important way that this leadership series drives critical community conversations forward, and we are thankful for their support. I would also like to express the council's thanks to the three major sponsors, AssetMark, Chevron, and the Martinez Refining Company. The council would like to thank sustaining sponsors, Marathon and Safeway. The council would like to thank contributing sponsors, CSAA Insurance Group, a AAA insurer, CEMEX, Contra Costa Association of Realtors, Contra Costa Water District, Gray Bowen Scott, H Cycle, Hacienda, IBEW Local 302, John Muir Health, Sutter Health, Wells Fargo, and the Workforce Development Board of Contra Costa County. Please join me in recognizing all of our employer sponsors. And with respect to members of the board who want to contribute as individuals, we have a special opportunity available, community leader sponsorship. Those names are on the screen. Please join me once again in recognizing their generous sponsorship of this series and their ongoing support of the Council's mission to advance economic vitality and quality of life in the East Bay. With that, it is my great pleasure to introduce my colleague on the Executive Committee, Deneen Wolford, to continue our program. Thank you.
Thank you, Horace. And hello, everyone. My name is Deneen Wolford. I am the Public Affairs Director for Kaiser Permanente's Diablo service area. Our service area encompasses Central and East Contra Costa County and the Tri-Valley, which includes 2 medical centers, 7 medical offices, and 3 behavioral health centers. I am also proud to serve on the East Bay Leadership Council's Executive Committee as Vice Chair of Events. In that role, I hope to help the organization plan events that connect, inform, and inspire our membership and the broader community. This year's leadership series has been delivered in all those ways and more, and I'm proud that Kaiser Permanente has continued our support of the series as the presenting sponsor. As local leaders, it is imperative to recognize the critical importance of effective policy solutions, particularly in areas such as healthcare, where the stakes are high and the need for thoughtful and innovative solutions is paramount. That is why it's my honor to introduce Tani Cantil-Sakauye, a distinguished leader who has dedicated her career to addressing the complex policy challenges facing California. Tani currently serves as the president and CEO of the Public Policy Institute of California. Her extensive experience in navigating California's intricate policy landscape has been and will continue to be instrumental in shaping the state's future. Prior to her role at the Public Policy Institute, Tani made history as the 28th Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, where she led the judiciary with distinction. As the chair of the Judicial Council, she played a pivotal role in shaping constitutional policy and rulemaking, making her the first person of color and the second woman to hold this esteemed position. With over 2 decades of service on California's appellate and trial courts, her expertise in legal matters is unparalleled. Her appointment or elevation to higher office by 3 governors underscores her reputation as a trusted and capable leader. Before her tenure as Chief Justice, she served as a deputy district attorney in Sacramento County and held influential positions on the senior staff of Governor Deukmejian. Here's a little aside, I interned for Governor Deukmejian, but anyway. Her academic credentials are equally impressive, holding both a BA and JD from the University of California at Davis. Please join me in welcoming Tani Cantil-Sakauye.
Good morning. Thank you, Deneen, for that kind introduction. Just want you to know, Kaiser Platinum double member. But also I want to thank Mark Orcutt and the East Bay Leadership Organization and Horace for inviting me to be with you. What a distinguished audience. And I am here today with my colleague, Ava Gambaro from the Public Policy Institute of California. Like all of you here, in our approaches and choices in our professional and student life and professional life soon to happen, I, like all of you, care about California. And my professional journey, like yours, has been dedicated to ensuring that California remains a place where dreams and opportunities can come true, where we maintain the California dream. California was a beacon to my family from the Philippines and from Hawaii as farm workers for the opportunity it provided. And may today and the future of California also continue to be that beacon, a place for opportunity and dreams to come true. This has special resonance for me, both as a justice and also now as part of PPIC. And that is because, as I mentioned, my grandparents paid the privilege of 8 years of contract farm work in Hawaii from the Philippines for the privilege of getting on a ship and stepping foot in San Francisco to spend their adult lives picking crops up and down the California croplands and farmlands and agricultural fields. But they came here for the opportunity, and they brought their own workforce, my 10 aunts and uncles, to find a place and time to start fresh in a country and a state that offered opportunity. And like your ancestor and families, my family, they weren't looking for a hand up. They weren't looking for a hand out. They were looking for a fair shake. And so through that, in building the communities, we didn't have a leadership series when I was growing up, but what we had were Filipino communities of our aunts and our uncles who were not blood related, but were people in the community, also many farm workers, who created a community of leadership so that all of the young people could have an opportunity, like the East Bay today is providing for the college students, to come to a place and watch and see leadership demystified and to be part of it. And at least for my trajectory, it was about justice. For me, it was about access to justice from an early point in my life. Being the youngest of a large Filipino family, our family taking the home that we paid for in cash out of eminent domain and being evicted was probably my first experience at 9 years old of having to move and having to hear my mother explain that the government was taking our home, that we lived in blight in an alley next to a brothel that was otherwise benign, let me tell you. But government in Sacramento said, out. My mother went pro se to court to fight an eminent domain, which, let me tell you, as a lawyer and as the Chief Justice, is almost impossible to win. The real litigation is in just compensation for the property taken, not in the taking of the property. That's another story. But let me point out that she went pro se, and all I remember about this proud woman who worked the fields to get a state job later on in her life, who didn't have an education except for a community college degree that she obtained at 50 years of age, was that she felt humiliated. It was not that she lost. It was felt that she was treated like she was something less than a person who owned a home and had a right to be in court. I knew nothing about this. I was 9 years old, but I can tell you this. To this day, I know the name of that judge. And it resonated with me. And after that experience, my mother, who knew nothing about law school, nothing about lawyers, nothing about college, took me to see the only Filipino lawyer and gave me the elbow and said, you could do that. Do what exactly? Whatever that is. And so over time, through a community college and through public opportunity, through college and internships, I had the opportunity to start that training to become that, to make a California that was about justice for all, taking the laws of those times in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s and making sure that people had access, and then ultimately becoming Chief Justice of California, something I never dreamed or planned, something that frankly, when I had to run for statewide office, I was told, you better drop the last name, Sakauye. I said, why would that be? Well, because A, you sound like you're a women's liber, and B, you sound ethnic. This was in 2010. And I wasn't gonna go home to my husband and say, I'm dropping my name, honey. So I ran. And the consultants were right. I lost in places like Alpine and Inyo and other smaller rural jurisdictions, but I won overwhelmingly statewide in the urban cores, and so became Chief Justice. And it was that work where, frankly, I was able to help you, many of you in this room, the lawyers, judges who are in different roles now, play a part in shaping policy for justice and running through the two branches of government and making that policy come true with battles. Many of you are elected officials, and you know all change starts local, and then you build a community and a coalition, and you stay on target, and you create and you negotiate, and sometimes advancement is baby steps. But for me at that time, that's what my last 12 years leading the largest judiciary in the United States as its chief. But I also point out that as a judge, and lawyers in this room know this, we deal with circumstances that have already happened when a policy or a law didn't work. And in the judicial branch of the three branches, we stay in our lane. We don't create new law. I'm going to just tell you the United States Supreme Court is a whole different animal. We don't create law in states. We, highest courts, clarify the rule of law, advance it, ask the legislature to do something about it. But it was then that it came to me that I have spent 32 years of my life on a bench working on policy that didn't work, policy that didn't cover everyone, policy that wasn't about access to justice for everyone. So when it came time to actually think about a change, because I had the opportunity to make a transition after 32 years wearing a black robe, I was able to think about the Public Policy Institute of California. You know, judges and lawyers know this well, and many of you who are elected officials who make decisions based on evidence, we weigh the facts in front of us, and we make a decision, and we make it methodically, when we make it logically, we make it objectively, and that's the end of it. We also lament the law didn't go far enough, it didn't really achieve its purpose, and that's it. So when I was able to transition and think, how can I get ahead of policy, ahead of law that is already made, what is out there in California that is independent, meaning they don't take money from organizations that want a specific outcome? Who is nonpartisan? Because that's what judges are. We spend our life being nonpartisan and trying to decide the case objectively. Who is engaged on some of California's most important issues? Where can I work to try to keep those issues out of a judiciary? And that was the Public Policy Institute of California. It is a 30-year institute. There are not very many institutes in California that are 30 years old and are independent and nonpartisan. But if you knew a little bit about the background, you'd explain why our mission and our core is to stay above the fray, be a think tank, that is, do our research, have it academically peer-reviewed, and provide it free of charge to anyone interested in lots of different digestible mediums, in videos, in blogs, in fact sheets, in reports that are 200 pages long, longer than most Supreme Court opinions. So I say this because PPIC was first created 30 years ago by three people who thought California needs an independent voice. California needs a voice that's civil while there is war, civil without toxic rhetoric, a balanced voice that can bring all voices to the table in order to get to better informed policy for all Californians. And those three people were Hewlett of Hewlett-Packard, understanding why an industry giant would need to feel so passionate about the need for informed research that he gave $30 million to start it. Then, of course, he brought the interest of the then president of the UC system, the finest private public UC research institute in the world. Its head says, you know, Hewlett, I agree with you. California needs a voice, needs to be an informed, nonpartisan, data-based center. And then the other person who came to join this trio was R.J. Miller, who was the whiz kid of Ford, who was also an industry leader, but was at the time the dean of Stanford Business School. And the three of these men came together, created the Public Policy Institute, created the core, which is where we are today, where we study 8 policy areas, including healthcare, the safety net under healthcare for vulnerable Californians. We study K through 12 education, higher education. We study criminal justice, water policy and climate. We survey Californians. We also have launched the Economic Policy Center in February, and I chair that policy focus called Understanding California's Future. I want to take the step of, let's look ahead and see where we are 10 years from now with these continuing trends. And where should we be? Under the whole Wayne Gretzky quote, a good hockey player plays where the puck is, a great hockey player plays where the puck is going to be. And I want to know, where are we going to be in 10 years so we can be prepared for, in California, the California dream. So we start that, we're doing it, we do it with enthusiasm, we do it with you. Thank you.
Testing, testing. Can you hear me all right? Is your microphone on too? I did.
Okay, good morning.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm sure you're as energized as I am. I was jotting down. I always have lots of questions prepared coming into this, and many of them, thank you for sharing questions ahead of time to help us fill up our bingo card today. Also, if you have a question card, please fill it out, or if questions come up throughout the course of the program, please, staff will circulate periodically to collect those. So I hope you'll engage in the conversation as well this morning. So, good morning, Tani. Thank you for kicking us off with some remarks. I always like to start with, how are you? Did you see the eclipse yesterday? How are you doing?
Thank you, I'm very well. I was out on the porch at PPIC, well, the balcony, looking at our partial eclipse and really thinking this is a time in history.
Yeah, I had a similar feel. I was on a call and totally missed it, but it came through that. Well, our staff did take a photo and through a pinhole, so I saw it that way. So that was nice.
Okay,
yeah,
that works too.
yeah. So that was my experience. But well, I'm glad that you're doing well this morning. Thank you for joining us out in the East Bay. This is a beautiful facility which certainly gives you a sense of the diversity of places and some of the reasons why so many dynamic businesses call the East Bay home. And so I'm interested in some of those questions you are answering about the economy. You had mentioned this Economic Policy Center and this new initiative at the Public Policy Institute. Tell us more about the vision. What are some key questions you're hoping to answer, and how might the employer community engage in that work?
That's terrific. We just launched our hard launch in February of this year, but we had been working on it for some time. It is blessed by our board. It is run by our Dr. Sarah Bone, who used to be our vice president of all of our research at PPIC. So the Economic Policy Center at PPIC is going to do what we think we do best, and that is the big tent of bringing in all of the voices, all of the interests to talk about California's economy and our issues. So we're focusing on labor, we're focusing on business, we're focusing on small business and small business loans, we're focusing on the workforce. We're focusing also not only on those as participants, but we're focusing on the demographics change in California. Our workforce is diminishing, California is aging, we are now anticipating major infrastructure and also tech changes. It's going to change everything about the work we do and trying to get ahead of that. Seeing jobs go away, but seeing new jobs also come in its place. So what we are doing first is what we always do at PPIC. We figure out what is the landscape now. We take now the pulse of where are we now. This is the baseline in California. So for example, we have recently released, I believe, one of our most recent reports, and we have a series of reports, the CARE report. The CARE report is about this aging population in California, this diminishing birth rate that's either flat or also on the decline, and also looking at California's master plan on aging and master plan on education. These two are different trajectories requiring more care. As boomers age, and 2050, the whole view that we will be a majority senior citizen community in California, we need a workforce to replace it. We've seen the economic issues of workforces that aren't replaced in other countries, in like Japan and like China. And so we are looking at what we need to improve the workforce, the care workforce. The care workforce is a sad workforce to me, just to be honest. These are caregivers, these are teachers, these are people in the medical field, and we know that that's also an aging population. We know at least care for our loved ones, or my 94-year-old mother-in-law, comes primarily from the statistics and the reports in and the surveys of Black and Latino women who are aging, who are families of their own, and nothing about the care community pays the kind of wage that can support a mortgage. I mean, that's a stunning piece of information. Thank you. Thank you. And that's the kind of work we're doing at PPIC, in the sense of we are calling out the need for different sectors, that they need better wages, that they need more upskill training, not only in community colleges but elsewhere. And we're putting it on paper, and we are doing this in lots of different industries to ensure this is where we are, California, this is what we need. That's the first place we're going in terms of what are the numbers, what do we need, what does California look like, all in hopes of supporting the California dream.
So many interlacing, interlocking issues that you're addressing at PPIC there. I also am curious about, a big part of the work is kind of gauging public opinion, which certainly gauges the kind of work that we do as policy leaders and elected officials. Obviously, public opinion drives so much of what becomes a priority in any given year. Any insights to what's on California's mind? Are there issues we're paying attention to? Anything that doesn't seem to quite fit when you look at the narrative and opinions of the public currently?
Great question, thank you. We all love our survey. So my predecessor, Mark Baldessari, when he decided to resign and write a book, I asked him to stay on as our policy director, which he'd been doing for over 25 years. We have one of the largest surveys in California. And we have one coming out soon on education. I just did the briefing, I just did the review. It should come out in a few days. But what we do know, I'll just pull some highlights from our survey. We know that from one of our recent surveys that 71% of Californians believe that the children of California will not have a better economic life than their parents. So that's pretty sobering, which tells us if our kids knew that, are they going to stay in California? We know also from different surveys and demographic studies out of PPIC, California has an out-immigration problem, and the people leaving are people with college degrees and people who and upper-income people. The first thing they do when they move to another state is they buy a house. I don't think I need to explain that to anyone here. And so we know is that under our surveys, Californians feel the number one issue is, and they lump it all together, economics. So it's cost of living, it's jobs, and it's the ability to own a home, which is all fueled by our lack of an economic plan and our inability to grow economic mobility across all sectors. That's part of the reason why we started the Economic Policy Center. We also do this really interesting study, because I know there's so many elected officials here, and that is that we take the pulse of how Californians feel about their government. And it's typically statewide, but we do also we do tabs that tell you the region. What's interesting to me is the inconsistency. Everyone believes, not everyone, but a majority believes California is going in the wrong direction, government-wise. But then a majority like and approve Governor Newsom. And there are also these other inconsistencies. The majority do not like the legislature, approve of the legislature. And my thought is, how do you think about this? Those are the people responsible for the direction of our state. And so there are inconsistencies in the survey itself. And the survey surveys not only voters, but people who are likely to vote across all demographics, et cetera. And we also study the politics of voting. We also survey what I want to say is crime and how people feel about crime and how certain parts of our community feel like they're more vulnerable to crime than others, because criminal justice is one of the areas that we study. We also, just for government, a majority of Californians disapprove, probably no surprise here, Congress and where they're acting. A majority of Californians support and want to see immigration in California, legalize some form of immigration in California, and are unhappy with the fact that nothing's happening.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna take the bait on a couple of those that you outlined there. So you had mentioned criminal justice, public safety. Certainly there's been much more kind of increasing debate and attention placed on Prop 47, potential reforms. Are we focused on the right thing? What kind of experiences to you as a former DA in the county of Sacramento and with decades on the bench bring to that kind of debate and discussion now at PPIC?
That's a really good question. So I probably don't have to tell you this also, but Prop 47 celebrates its 10th year, I think last year or this year. Celebrate is probably the wrong word. As the Chief Justice and as an appellate justice before I was on the Supreme Court, an inordinate amount of time, judicial resources were spent trying to understand Prop 47, so broadly written by initiative, not by statute, and so no legislative history as to what the creators were thinking about. And so Prop 47, as written, has had a lot of consequences that I don't know voters actually anticipated happening. And so Prop 47, primarily reducing most felony drug possession charges to misdemeanors, really affected the ability of courts to keep people and force people into drug rehab programs for any period of time. So we don't really have court-enforced drug rehabilitation programs. We still have the programs, and we still do some diversion, but they're smaller programs. Also, with the biggest piece of Prop 47 that reduced felony larceny to a misdemeanor, unless it's $950 or more, has had a lot of collateral consequences on theft as a whole. And so what we've seen in criminal justice surveys and our own reporting is that there's an underreporting of crime, underreporting of theft, underreporting period, because businesses and some folks who live here just don't think it's worth it because agencies, law enforcement agencies, aren't acting on it. And we've also seen potentially, whether it's correlated or not, an increase in home unsheltered and an increase in crime, a hollowing out of the urban core, a concern about safety in the urban core. And we're seeing now our legislature, 10 years later, looking at these issues, fentanyl use, theft, other crimes. From my point of view, not speaking for PPIC, I do not know how it is that we can curb unlawful or crime without some consequences. And the consequences, I don't mean education alone, that's a piece of it. It's also a work plan. It's also some oversight. It's also some reporting. It's also the ability to have consequences, sort of like timeouts of sorts, and we have some things like that, but we need to have consequences, otherwise it continues, otherwise people don't report. So is the legislature acting on that? Not really, not yet. This is a big election year. There is a movement to qualify a Prop 47 rewrite on the ballot, trying to qualify that with signatures through an initiative process. There are efforts in the legislature, but it's an election year. I'm not sure we're going to see a lot happening before November. So we're talking about it a lot. The state's talking about it, but there's not any action happening.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good question as it relates to the ballot initiative process. And we actually had some questions submitted ahead of time kind of on this topic in particular. Is it time to consider reforms to the ballot initiative process in the state of California, as some kind of worry about it subverting a more deliberative legislative process? Do you have any thoughts on the ballot initiative process broadly? What do you think we could do as a state, or are you a unabashed fan of that part of our democratic process?
It depends. So you already know that California is unique in having an initiative process. And the initiative process, which is the ballot process or referendum referendum, is uniquely California. And it's easy to amend our Constitution by getting an initiative supported by individuals who can pay for it to go on the ballot and to have then advertise it. What you don't know about the voter initiative process is the California Supreme Court is the only backstop to an initiative. It is the last court of it's the final court. It's the only court in California that can truly tell you that an initiative is unconstitutional or sever parts of it, or also affirm and support it. So if you ask a retired California Supreme Court justice how they feel about the initiative process,
I think we just did.
It's full-time employment, folks.
Yeah.
We're still litigating Prop 13 pieces. They never go away. So, to your question, as you know, the initiative process was once a tool to combat big financial special interests like the trains, like big mogul work. It is now anybody's game if you can afford it. And it serves a useful process because the legislature cannot always get big things done. So I have a love-hate relationship with the initiative process.
Love-hate, that's a good way of characterizing it. And now, as I coming off of a discussion of the ballot initiative process, I've certainly been doing lots of reflecting about a recent initiative that was just on the ballot in the state of California, Prop 1. Very narrow victory, I think by 0.2%. Certainly a big impact and a new policy in the state of California. I'm in particular curious about your thoughts on the impacts on the care courts, but if you'd like to comment more broadly about kind of what that means. As we were looking at polls, housing and addressing homelessness, one of the top polling issues in the state of California. We go to the ballot, barely passes. So what does that say about kind of attitudes of voters in the state of California? That's the kind of macro question, but I'm also curious about kind of its implementation, if you have any thoughts about its impact on the care courts and other policy mechanisms in the state.
Huge question, but I'm going to first start with care courts. Care courts were the brainchild of the executive branch maybe 4 years ago. They came to me at the Judicial Council and said, look, we're going to do this thing called care court. And so I sat through meetings, and my experts sat through meetings, and I said, I truly hope you are not setting the courts up to fail and hold the bag here, because there is no enforcement mechanism. Someone or an entity can petition to bring a person into care court, but care court is voluntary. If the person walks away, the court has no mechanism to bring someone back. It's not like a criminal conviction. You're on probation, we can bring you back, and you're ordered to come back, and you come back, and then we can work with you thereon. They walk away, they walk away. So I'm worried, executive branch, I won't tell you who I was talking to, that you are setting the courts up to fail. This is your answer. You don't really have implementation, and the courts are going to be the people holding the bag. And I wonder about that. I worry about that. So what's your answer? Oh, it'll all be worked out in the legislative process. I'm like, really? I'd like to hear a firm answer that you're going to tell the legislature how this is going to work. And it did get refined, but ultimately is still the same. People can walk away. There are not consequences to walking away. Then I look at Prop 1, and I fully agree. We have to do something about the unsheltered, the unhoused. California's population in that regard has spiked. We have the largest population, et cetera. We all know those statistics. Our housing supply is short. But when the governor arranged to have Prop 1 be the only initiative on the March ballot, I thought this is going to be a shoo-in until I started talking to you, until I started talking to counties. And it's not that it's not a good idea to take some of that mental health money and redistribute it for drug use and care and homes, et cetera, housing. The problem is, just like you said, it's implementation. It's the rollout. It's having a program manager actually make that work for the state. Now, I will just say, 32 years as a jurist, 12 years running, the state is not good at implementation. The state is not good about rolling out processes. We have lots of programs to help young people. We have the young people who are getting on their feet. We have tax credits. We have programs. Most of that money, a lot of it, and we have some of our reports that say so, goes unspent because people don't know how to get to it. They don't know how to access it. Mm-hmm. And so you're telling me now that we're going to take money that was previously for the counties and we're going to put it in a state entity and we're going to let the state run it. I'm a little skeptical about that.
Sure. Yeah.
And I don't blame the counties, and I think that's where it had to have been. There was very little money in opposition to Prop 1. Prop 1 had a lot of money, a lot of campaigns, and boy, did it struggle, barely squeaked by. And I think that's because the counties knew to go big in California is not always the answer to our problem.
Yeah, and I think some really important questions for local leaders to ask as we consider our own kinds of initiatives to fund local priorities. Some things may be popular from a policy perspective, but what is the appetite of voters to take on those reforms and trust in government to implement them? So some big questions there. Another big question that kind of overlapped with your time on the court, University California, Berkeley, go Bears is usually what someone yells at some point when I say that word, has been in the spotlight as it relates to CEQA and housing. Can you speak to your experience with that 2022 UC Berkeley enrollment case and kind of the ongoing litigation as it relates to People's Park?
Well, yes and no, but I can say this. The California Environmental Quality Act is designed to be user-friendly, and it is really, as you already know, an act that is meant to inform decision makers like yourself as to whether or not you should go forward with a project that may have an adverse impact on the environment. And I will be the first to tell you, prior to my time, that the Supreme Court expanded CEQA to not only include public but now private builds, and that the regulations that are really more probably informative than the actual statutes in code. So at least on the Berkeley student admission case that I was still on as the Chief Justice, even though the question to the Supreme Court was posed as whether or not Berkeley could admit these thousands of more students with the lack of housing plan under CEQA, the question before the Supreme Court that came up out of the First District Court of Appeal from San Francisco was not about the substance of the question. It wasn't about CEQA itself. The question really before us was whether or not the procedural matter, an injunction could be used for this purpose. It wasn't about the merits. And there was Supreme Court discussion. As you know, we ultimately denied review, which didn't mean that we sided with either side. It just meant that this civil procedure process was appropriate. We weren't going to intervene. We were going to let the First District Court of Appeal keep the case and decide it on the merits, and then if we needed to, the Supreme Court would review it. So some of the benefits of something like that is the case will be heard quicker if it goes to the Court of Appeal where it was originally placed. If you come up and try to jump to the Supreme Court, it's going to take a couple of years. We rely on the lower court's opinions, their thoughts, their analyses. We value trial judges' views and opinions. That's why things go from trial court to Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court, because we're being inclusive. What are people saying? What's the viewpoint? What are the lawyers saying? What are the theories? That's why we don't pretend to know everything.
Yeah, so we have certainly entered into the space of, and I think this raises a lot of questions about the judiciary. I was going to have to practice saying judiciary a lot this morning before we came on stage. But what do you believe, what responsibility do you believe the courts have to intervene or defer to legislative and executive branches on matters of policy? Any big question as it relates to the judicial branch. Any insights that you can share with us?
Yes, many, but I'll leave it to this. There are three separate branches of government, as you know, each to perform a check on the other. Sometimes the lanes are fuzzy, and it's hard to know when to jump in and when to defend and when to back off. As the Chief Justice and head of the Judicial Council, I found myself in more government separation of power fights with the legislature than ever before. Not with the governor, who seemed to have a Brown or Newsom, who seemed to have a better understanding of the lanes. It was with the legislature. And my fights with the legislature were primarily that they were well-intended. But that was my lane. That was a Judicial Council's lane. Do not give us a statute that tells us a briefing schedule. A briefing schedule is up to the judge. It's up to the judge to sit with the lawyers and the clients and find out what your schedule is like. Also, I remember a big fight I had with John Perez. Thank goodness for term limits, just because he didn't like me, and we're friends now.
Thank goodness for term limits.
We're
a great
friends
quote.
now.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, and he was angry about something. People were angry at us, and he was the leader of the assembly. And so they ordered us to, there's a statute to have something to do with public meetings and public records. And I had to call and say, please, 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 let us draft our own internal rules. And if you don't like them and they don't work, then you can come in and tell the judiciary how it should hold its records and how it should release its records. But a judiciary has a lot of preliminary drafts where we are exploring our own ignorance with our colleagues, where we are questioning the bases of analyses. If I know that that's going to be released and I am completely ignorant about an issue, I'm not going to write it. So I said, you might chill us. So please, Mr. Speaker, give us an opportunity. And he did. So we have lane fights, but it's all because the legislature cares deeply, their leaders are strong, and I just think the judiciary has to sort of hold its own.
Yeah, and I have lots of other judicial questions, but I'm going to try to keep us moving through a few other pockets here. You did lead the California Supreme Court, I believe, through an era of many near or unanimous decisions. Are there lessons there for leaders who certainly strive for bipartisan policy solutions? What kind of reflections do you have on your time and kind of seeking bipartisan policy advancements?
Thank you. And I really believe you probably already do this, but it's having those hard conversations with your colleagues face to face so that you are able to read them and they you, but not backing off of what you do need them to hear, what they need you to hear, but always being incredibly respectful and having your language be the softest that you can possibly be. So many times around the table of 7 when we're looking at each other, I'd have a colleague say, I'm so glad that we can have this conversation. I feel like this is a really safe place. Also, sometimes my colleagues would disagree and I would have to look to another colleague and say, did he just disagree with me? And she would say, I think he did. And so it's soft, we're gentle with each other because we know this is just one case, but we listen and we really try to put ourselves in the shoes of the person who is contrary to our interest. And I've learned a lot and have come to respect them even more when we disagree. But we do so in the kindest possible way.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point around civility. And that was another initiative that you helped carry, right? During your time as Chief Justice, you proposed many policy initiatives. One was focused on civil discourse for students. We have some students and some students for life, some lifelong learners in the audience today. So how did that become a priority for you? How do we advance this kind of civil education and discourse in our society?
I think we have to model it. So I was a trial attorney before a judge, and I came up in a time it felt like there was no civility, yelling, screaming, people arguing, and I found myself engaging in the very same things. And when I became a judge, it's just I can't have this. So I put out rules in my courtroom. None of this, none of that, none of this, none of that. And then in time, people referred to my courtroom as the Zen courtroom. And it really wasn't so much that. It's like, I'm going to let you make your record. I'm not going to jump down your throat. You're going to be done. You're going to be done. Mm-hmm. But when I'm speaking, after you're done, you do not get to do the same thing.
I think this could be a TV show, Zen Court, Tani Cantil-Sakauye. This feels pretty good. Then you got People's Court, you got all these. Zen Court would be your show. I like that.
Attorneys do their best under those circumstances.
Yeah, I think I'm going to transition back slightly because I can't stay out of the judicial area. But how important is fostering public trust and kind of maintaining that judicial independence? Like, what can we do? Maybe there's a sense of civility or education that needs to be folded into this, but how do we continue to build that trust in this important part of our government?
That is a truly critical piece because the judicial branch of government, whatever state you're in or federally, has always been the most respected of the 3 branches. I'm not saying high regards, high numbers, but of the 3 most respected. But I think it's partly because we are not politicians in black robes. You can come and see a decision, you can see it happening, you can come to the courtroom, you can tune into YouTube during COVID. We write out our decisions. You can watch us live. It might be the most boring thing you've ever seen. I used to punish my teenage daughters by making them come to oral argument, and they'd be sideways in the chairs. But the point is we're transparent, and then we write it out for you, and then you see how we disagree, and that is someplace where I'm hoping you understand that we show all our cards.
Yeah. Well, you certainly have shown a sense of humor this morning that I've certainly appreciated. And I've heard you talk about how one of the most important characteristics of a judge is their sense of humor. Why is that? Are there lessons for other leaders in making sure that we embrace that humor side of ourselves?
I think so. I mean, I realize as judges we have to be very careful. So when you're a judge, everyone laughs at everything you do that you think is funny, and you come off feeling like you're funnier than you are. So you have to draw the line, and you have different relationships with lawyers with whom you're comfortable. You can be more yourself, but with new judges or with clients, particularly, you're on the record in the open court. Just like as elected officials and staff, we are answerable to the public, and the public wants serious, direct answers. And yet we also want to foster an environment where people can be at their best.
Yeah.
And sometimes humor helps.
Yeah. No, I think that's helpful. Certainly, there's a lot of different questions that I could kind of overlay here, but I'm thinking a lot about the students in the audience and the role that educators played in kind of your journey. You went to McClatchy High School in Sacramento, which has some notable alumni, not just included, you would think that you would be the top of the list for the alumni, but we've got Justice Anthony Kennedy, Representative Matsui, California Attorney General Javier Becerra, California State Senator Steve Glazer, and yourself. What's going on at McClatchy High School, and what role did some of those educators play in your life as you kind of had these different career and personal crossroads?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know what caused that kind of, but we had a very robust government affairs class, so we were all encouraged to take part. And it was a really friendly, diverse school, so you never felt ostracized. And you were celebrated for your idiosyncrasies, I think, so we felt free. But I would say to young people that you can only be yourself and your best version of yourself. And the version you are now is not your best version yet. And I'm going to tell you, even when you are well over retirement age, you're still not at your best version yet. And there are just parts of you that you don't even really know you can do, that are outside your personality. So do hard things and do things that make you uncomfortable.
Well, and there were some different paths for you that it laid out at one point. I read that you were at one point a blackjack dealer in Reno. Is that right? So I mean, do you have any insights? No, I'm kidding. But like, is there, as you kind of think about, was there a path not taken for you in terms of your career? As you said, you didn't even dream during your remarks of being a California Supreme Court justice. Was there another dream that maybe was deferred?
No, I didn't have a dream. I remember, probably like none of you, I grew up without an internet. And so what I knew of jobs was what I knew other people did. So I had the job in Lake Tahoe dealing blackjack for Harrah's during law school because, as everyone knows, a first-year student can't get a paying job. So I volunteered for a criminal defense firm, and then I worked at Harrah's dealing blackjack to make some money for the next year. But in any job you get, you learn a great deal. Like I could pick a jury after seeing a table full of drunks.
Good point. Yeah.
You learn a great deal.
Yeah.
In any job, you just pick what you need. Get the best of what you can take from this. So there wasn't another path. I thought I enjoyed everything I did and thought I would stay there. I didn't have a career path. Maybe I should have, but I didn't have a career path.
Well, I'll talk to you after if there's any tips that you have for me. I'm actually, if there was a path, it's actually as professional jurist. I've been on 4 juries in like 8 years. I'm like the Golden State Warriors of jurists. I'm a dynasty. I really continue to be picked. Yeah, it's something. I've been at every courthouse in Contra Costa County and a federal courthouse in San Francisco when I lived in San Francisco. So it doesn't matter what county I'm in, I'm your juror.
You could write a book about what goes on as long as you don't divulge secrets.
Mistrust, whatever, from the whole thing, from the whole piece of the part, I have been a part of the jury. So, but okay, I'm going to take a little bit of I'm kind of staying on the track of trying to kind of continue to get to know you. We had said in your introduction that you were the first woman of color to serve as California's Chief Justice. Did you think of yourself as a trailblazer now or then? How does that interface with your story or where you're going?
You know, not at all. I mean, I knew, like anyone in our professions, we have struggles. I didn't think mine were different from anyone else's. I didn't think it was because I was a woman, and I didn't think it was because of my ethnicity. You know, in the law, everyone wants to win. And so I didn't think it was personal. And so being so involved in the work you do, and it's got to be true for all of you, and I'm thinking is, it's hardly a time when I actually think about myself or what I look like or how it comes off, because we're just so interested in the present moment. Mm-hmm. So when Governor Schwarzenegger appointed me to be Chief Justice, and there was a lot of talk about the firsts and legacies, and that sort of, it's not that it surprised me, it's just hadn't been a focus before that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a few different questions here. One was on kind of the state of the GOP. You kind of very publicly changed from being Republican registered to being no party preference in 2018. Any thoughts on the state of the GOP today?
Well, certainly in California, while we have a GOP, as you know, in the legislature, they're largely ineffective just because we've become a one-party state, even though there are differences in the one party. So I'm aware of that. I was registered Republican since I was 18 years of age. You know, little secret, I wanted an internship with Senator Jim Nielsen, and I was in college, and they wanted a Republican, so check that box.
We all have our reasons. Yeah, that's a good story.
But, right, then I found out I had enough units to graduate, so I didn't end up doing that internship. But this is 1980, and the Republican Party platform and Governor Duke Majan resonated with me. So I remained that and never thought about it because my professional work doesn't turn on the politics before us. In fact, we're very careful to keep our politics out of things. But it wasn't until, I guess it was the mid-20s, 2015, 2017, when I quietly changed to NPP because several reasons. I thought that truly is more fitting of a judge's role. Politics is not part of who we are. And also because I had young daughters who were watching the Kavanaugh confirmation, and they had so many questions about it, and I had no answers. And it caused me to reflect and then finally make that change.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of politics and the judiciary, I'm going to say that word again. How much faith do you have in the judiciary to hold President Trump accountable for actions during and after his presidency? That's a question from the audience.
That's a good question. I have pretty good faith that that will be the case. But I will also say this. I expect that all of these cases will eventually wind up at the United States Supreme Court and be argued publicly with an archive for us to listen. And that also there will be an opinion written, and maybe the opinion will be 6-3, and maybe there'll be multiple opinions on each of these cases. But for me, that is the third branch in action, that you get to read and hear and see all that transpired to get to this decision. It may not be that we agree with it, and honestly, there are places that I've been where I did not personally agree, but legally felt this was the correct answer if I stayed true to my training. And so in the United States, when we have three branches of government, that's what we will, that's part of our inheritance. And the other two branches are free to do things about that if they don't like opinion.
Yeah. And I think there's a theme throughout of community engagement and kind of your leadership where you're taking PPIC and your story. As we're running short on time here, this will be one of my last questions. I have like a fun little lightning round that we'll actually close with. But what role do you see for individuals in kind of shaping California's future? And how might they engage with the Public Policy Institute of California as part of that work?
Thank you. I think that we have a responsibility to engage, even if our primary time professionally is spent in some other discipline, taxes, real estate, business. I think we all have parts of ourselves to give, and I think it starts locally. It starts knowing your community. It starts being part of that. Those things that affect your life, that's what you should be involved in. And it grows from there. Expertise grows, friendships, partnerships grow, issues grow. You become sort of a grassroots expert in what is being discussed, and you have credibility. I think that we need that engagement. If we don't do that engagement ourselves, if we're not involved, someone else will take up that vacuum. Someone else will do it. That was my biggest concern with the three branches of government. Wait, other two branches, let us do it first. We're working on it now. Give us a chance. Don't presume to know what's best for us. So I think that we need to get engaged, and if we don't, we are losing something valuable.
Yeah. Anything really that we need to be paying attention to coming out of the PPIC in the next few months?
Yes, well, let me just say, PPIC's products are all free thanks to our support. And so you can access them online, you can access them. We do a lot of speaker series events. I'll just say May 30th, we're having a conversation with Senator Padilla, who's coming to town to talk about what's happening in Washington.
We actually hosted a conversation with him when he was Secretary of State right on this stage several years ago. So see, we'll continue to collaborate and pitch speaker ideas to each other.
That.
This is good.
We're free, and if you sign up in person, we give you a great lunch at the Sheraton as part of it.
Hey, okay, now we're all right.
Our sponsors.
That's nice. That's nice. That's a word for our sponsors. You know, we could too be at the Sheraton. Yeah. Okay. Lovely. No, thank you for that. Okay, a couple lightning round fun questions to close. So this is nothing heavy. One, bagels or donuts? Bagels, absolutely. Good. Strong start. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Coffee. We're 2 for 2. Podcast or music on your drives through the state of California?
Both. It depends what kind of mood I'm in.
I'm gonna need an answer.
I need an answer. Music.
There it is. All right. Legal pad or laptop?
Legal pad.
Legal pad. Okay, classic. And I hear did I hear right that you're a tennis player? Is it tennis, pickleball, or paddle? I hear is now a thing. There was a story in the New York Times about some new pickleball adjacent sport. Do you have one of choice?
I do. It's golf.
Golf. None of the above. Thank you very much for your time, your insights, and your continued leadership. We're very grateful that you joined us today. So thank you, Tani. Thank you so much. Good. Thank you very much. All right, our next event is the QR code will be up here May 1st with the Wells Fargo Institute and Economic Outlook. I hope to see you there on Zoom. Thank you very much.